The emergency alarm echoed through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building, bringing together representatives from 3 of the most powerful civilizations in known space. Ambassador Kreth of the Alterian Empire paced nervously in front of the massive viewing screen that displayed human colony positions across the Outer Rim territories. His blue-scaled skin seemed darker than usual, a sign of stress among his people. "They have refused our final demand," Kreth announced to the assembled delegates. "The humans will not abandon their expansion into what they call the Western Spiral. They claim these star systems belong to no one, and that they have every right to settle there." General Voss of the Draken Confederacy slammed his clawed fist onto the metal table. The sound rang throughout the chamber like a gunshot. "Insolent mammals," he growled. "They think because they won a few fights against space pirates that they can challenge real military powers." Commander Yala from the Helios Union activated her holographic display, showing detailed intelligence reports about human military capabilities. "Our scouts have been watching their forces for months," she reported. "They have approximately 2 million active soldiers spread across all their worlds. Their ships are decent, but nothing compared to our combined fleets." The 3 civilizations had spent years building this alliance specifically to deal with the human problem. The Alterians brought discipline and advanced energy weapons. The Draken Confederacy offered their genetically enhanced shock troops who lived for battle. The Helios Union provided cutting-edge technology and the largest fleet in their sector. "How many forces can we bring against them?" asked Council Leader Ziran. His tentacled form swayed as he spoke, a gesture that indicated serious consideration among his species. 50 million troops," General Voss replied with satisfaction, "plus over 300 warships of various classes. We outnumber them 25 to 1. Ambassador Kreth nodded slowly. "The humans have shown they can fight when cornered, but they have never faced a coordinated assault from multiple galactic powers. Most of their military experience comes from fighting criminals and raiders." What none of them mentioned was the growing unease spreading through intelligence. Networks across the galaxy human conflicts were studied in military academies, not as examples of proper warfare, but as case studies in what happened when a species refused to accept conventional limits on violence. Humans had a disturbing habit of escalating conflicts far beyond what other species considered reasonable. "Commander," Yala pulled up footage from recent human military actions. "Look at this recording from their conflict with the Nebula Raiders," she said. "When the Raiders took human civilians as hostages, the human response was to track down every Raider base in 3 star systems. They didn't just rescue their people, they wiped out the entire Raider organization and left warning. Messages carved into asteroids. Excessive but understandable," General Voss commented. "Any species would protect their civilians. The difference is that we know when to stop. Humans seem to lack that wisdom." The truth was more complex. Human military doctrine had been shaped by thousands of years of warfare on their homeworld. They had learned lessons that other species never needed to learn, because those other species had never faced the same level of existential threats. When humans fought, they fought as if their entire species depended on victory. "Our strategy is simple," Kreth explained to the council. "We strike their primary colonies simultaneously. Overwhelming force applied quickly will prevent them from organizing effective resistance. They will have to surrender or watch their settlements burn." The plan looked perfect on paper. 3 separate assault groups would hit the most important human colonies. The humans would be forced to split their already small military across multiple fronts, even if they fought bravely. Mathematics would decide the outcome. "What about their homeworld?" asked Ziran. "We leave Earth alone initially," Commander Yala replied. "Let them watch their colonies fall. When they realize resistance is hopeless, they will negotiate. If they refuse, then we consider more extreme measures." The delegates began discussing logistics and timing. Ships would be positioned within striking distance of human space. Supply lines would be established. Communications networks would be prepared to handle coordination between 3 different military traditions. None of them noticed the small device hidden among the decorative crystals that lined the council chamber. It looked like just another piece of the elaborate artwork that covered the walls. In reality, it was a human surveillance drone that had been in place for months. Every word spoken in the chamber was being recorded and transmitted to human intelligence services. The device had been placed by agents who had infiltrated Galactic Council security years earlier. These weren't soldiers or diplomats, they were specialists whose existence was known only to a handful of people in human government. They had been preparing for this exact scenario since humans first encountered other intelligent species. The assault begins in 1 week, Kreth announced. Our combined fleets will demonstrate that humanity's time as an independent species has ended. They will submit to galactic authority or face the consequences. As the council session ended and delegates returned to their ships, the surveillance drone continued recording. It captured conversations about troop movements, supply requirements, and communication codes. All of this information was already on its way to human military command. The aliens had made several critical errors. First, they assumed that human military capabilities could be measured by observing conventional conflicts. Second, they believed that overwhelming numbers would prevent humans from escalating to more extreme tactics. Third, they had no idea that humanity maintained military units whose very existence violated several galactic treaties. Within hours of the council meeting, encrypted messages were racing across human communication networks. Regular military forces began preparing for defensive actions. But other messages went to facilities that didn't appear on any official records. Men and women whose psychological profiles would have terrified civilian authorities started receiving activation orders. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between human soldiers and human killers. They had studied humanity's wars and concluded they understood the scope of human violence. But they had only observed humans fighting other humans, with shared biology and cultural restraints. They had never seen what humans were capable of when those restraints were completely removed. The coming war would not be decided by ship counts or troop numbers. It would be decided by which species was willing to go furthest to secure victory. The aliens were about to discover that in any contest of extremes, humans had no equals. The first explosions lit up the night sky above New Babylon Colony, like deadly fireworks. Lieutenant Sarah Kim gripped the controls of her fighter as alien warships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming under the light of 3 moons. Through her neural interface, targeting data flooded her consciousness faster than most species could even process visual information. All wings, this is control. Came the voice of Captain Alex Rodriguez over the comm system. We count 300 enemy vessels against our 80 ships. Remember, people? We're not here to win this fight. We're here to send a message and buy time for evacuation. Sarah's fighter screamed through space toward the advancing Alterian fleet. Her wingman, pilot officer Mike Chen, stayed close beside her as they approached the massive enemy cruisers. The aliens had arranged themselves in traditional battle formations, clearly expecting a conventional engagement. Sarah, you seeing what I'm seeing? Mike's voice crackled through static. They're targeting the civilian evacuation ships. Through her scope, Sarah watched in horror as enemy fighters broke away from the main fleet to pursue the defenseless transports carrying families away. From the colony, children and elderly civilians who had done nothing except live in the wrong place at the wrong time. Control, this is Wing Leader Kim, she reported, her voice tight with controlled rage. Enemy forces are engaging civilian. Targets request permission to break formation. Permission granted, Rodriguez replied. All units, the rules just changed. Show these aliens what happens when they target our families. What followed would be remembered as one of the most vicious space battles in recorded history. The human forces immediately abandoned standard military tactics and began fighting like cornered animals. Instead of maintaining formation, ships split into small hunting packs and began stalking individual enemy vessels. Sarah dove her fighter between 2 Alterian cruisers, using their own weapons fire to damage each other. When her missiles ran out, she began ramming attacks against enemy fighter squadrons. Her ejection pod was designed to survive such impacts, but the psychological effect on alien pilots was devastating. On the surface of New Babylon, Colonel Maria Santos watched through her binoculars as Dracon dropships landed near the main settlement. Her infantry battalion was outnumbered 10 to 1, but they had advantages the aliens didn't understand. Humans had been fighting on their own worlds for millennia. They knew every trick of urban warfare. "Listen up, Marines," Santos announced over the tactical network. "These aliens think they're fighting a conventional battle. They have no idea what humans do to invaders who threaten our children. The Drake and Shock troops were genetically engineered for combat. Standing over 2 meters tall with natural armor plating and enhanced reflexes, they had conquered dozens of worlds using overwhelming physical superiority. What they weren't prepared for was an enemy that refused to fight fairly. Santos had rigged every building in the settlement with explosives. As the Dracon forces advanced through the streets, entire blocks disappeared in carefully timed detonations. The aliens found themselves fighting not just human soldiers, but the environment itself. Field Commander Grex to Fleet Command came an intercepted alien transmission. "These humans are not fighting like any military force in our databases. They're using their own wounded as bait to draw our troops into ambushes. They've turned their own city into a weapon." Private Lisa Park lay motionless in the rubble of what had been a shopping center. Blood covered her uniform and her breathing was shallow. To the approaching Dracon patrol, she looked like another casualty. They didn't notice the detonator in her hand until it was too late. The explosion took out 6 enemy soldiers and provided covering fire for her squad to reposition. Lisa had volunteered for the mission knowing she might not survive. The shrapnel wounds were real but not fatal. She had used her own blood to make the injuries look worse than they were. In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The human fleet had lost 2/3 of its ships, but they had cost the aliens dearly. Captain Rodriguez watched from his command ship as his pilots executed increasingly desperate attacks. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "Civilian Transport Delta 7 is requesting permission to join the attack. They say they've loaded their cargo hold with fusion reactors set to overload." Rodriguez closed his eyes for a moment. The transport was carrying evacuated families who had refused to flee while their military fought. "Tell them permission granted," he said quietly, "and tell them it's been an honor." The freighter, New Hope, accelerated toward the enemy flagship, its civilian crew broadcasting farewell messages to their families. The Alterian commander tried to order his ship to evade, but the transport was too close. When the fusion reactors detonated, the explosion destroyed 3 enemy cruisers and damaged 5 more. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human forces used tactics that violated galactic warfare conventions. They targeted medical ships, they broadcast false surrender signals, they used chemical weapons and biological agents. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to welcome death if it meant taking enemies with them. After 6 hours of fighting, New Babylon colony lay in ruins. The alien coalition had achieved their objective, but the cost was staggering. They had lost nearly 1/3 of their assault fleet to destroy a single human settlement defended by regular military forces. Admiral Korath, reported the Alterian Fleet Intelligence Officer. "We need to revise our estimates of human military capability. These soldiers fought with coordination and ruthlessness that exceeds our models." "How is that possible?" Korath demanded. "Our intelligence indicated these were typical human forces." The truth was even more disturbing. The forces at New Babylon were indeed typical human soldiers. They had fought conventionally within the bounds of their standard training. They had used only equipment and tactics that were considered normal by human military standards. What the aliens didn't realize was that human normal was shaped by a species that had never known a moment of peace in its entire evolutionary history. Every human soldier was trained to fight as if the survival of their species depended on victory, because throughout human history, it usually had, as reports from New Babylon spread through the alien coalition, military planners began to question their assumptions. If regular human forces could inflict such casualties, what were their elite units capable of? What weapons and tactics had they not yet seen? Deep in classified facilities across human space, those questions were about to be answered. Personnel with no official designation were receiving new orders. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's regular army in action. Now they were about to meet the humans who specialized in ending civilizations. General Patricia Hayes sat alone in her office beneath the Rocky Mountains. watching news footage from New Babylon colony on multiple screens. Smoke still rose from the ruins where 20,000 civilians had lived just days before. The alien coalition had won their first victory, but they had no idea what they had just triggered. Her secure communication system chimed with an incoming call from the emergency session of the Human Colonial Senate, 27 worlds represented by holographic projections of their elected leaders. Their faces showed the strain of watching their people die while they debated in safety. "General Hayes," said Senator David Park from Kepler Colony, "we need to discuss our response options. The regular military performed admirably at New Babylon, but we're facing overwhelming numbers. Perhaps it's time to consider negotiation." Hayes looked directly into the camera. "Senator, with respect, negotiation requires a willing partner. Our intelligence indicates the alien coalition isn't interested in territorial concessions or tribute. They want us extinct." She activated her tactical display, showing enemy fleet movements across human space. 300 ships carrying 50 million troops. They're not planning to occupy our worlds. They're planning to sterilize them. This is a war of extermination, disguised as conquest, Senator. Lisa Chen from Earth's Pacific Federation leaned forward. "What are you proposing, General?" "Our conventional forces are outnumbered 25-1. I'm requesting authorization to deploy Special Operations Forces," Hayes replied. The silence that followed was telling every senator knew what that meant, though few had ever been briefed on the full capabilities of humanity's most classified military units. "General," Senator Park said carefully, "the last time special operations were deployed was during the Titan Rebellion. The casualty ratios from that conflict were classified, but the psychological evaluation reports are still sealed." Hayes smiled without humor. "The Titan Rebellion was an internal conflict with rules of engagement. This is an existential threat to our species. The aliens believe they understand human military capabilities based on observing conventional conflicts. They are incorrect." She pulled up personnel files with heavily redacted information. "I have 12,000 individuals across various special operations units. They have been training for this exact scenario for decades. They are experts in asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, and what our enemies would classify as terror tactics." The senators exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had approved the funding for these programs without fully understanding what they were creating. It was easier to sign authorization forms than to confront the reality of what humanity might need to survive among hostile alien civilizations. "General," Senator Chen said quietly, "the galactic community already views humanity as excessively violent. If we deploy these forces, there may be no coming back from the reputation we'll earn." Hayes activated another screen showing intercepted alien communications. "Senator, the galactic community has already demonstrated their intention to commit genocide against our species. I'm not concerned about our reputation among those who wish to see us extinct." The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was never really in doubt. When faced with extinction, any species would use whatever weapons were available. The vote was unanimous, though several senators would later claim they felt they had no choice. Within minutes of authorization, coded messages began transmitting to facilities that didn't appear on any official maps. Deep beneath Mars, Captain Ryan Mitchell received his activation orders and gathered his team in a briefing room that hadn't been used in 3 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to 11 individuals whose combined psychological profiles would have terrified most civilian psychiatrists, "we're going to work." Sergeant Anna Lopez finished sharpening her combat knife and looked up with interest. About time I was getting restless. These weren't soldiers in any conventional sense. They were specialists who had volunteered for psychological conditioning that removed normal human inhibitions about violence. They had been trained to operate without the moral constraints that limited regular military forces. "Our mission parameters are different from anything you've done before," Mitchell explained. "The enemy has demonstrated they consider our civilian populations to be legitimate military targets under the Colonial Defense Act. This removes all restrictions on our rules of engagement." Staff Sergeant Mike Johnson studied technical specifications of alien biology on his tablet. Their nervous systems are more sensitive than baseline humans, he observed. Useful information. Dr. Emily Foster, the team's specialist in alien psychology, activated her own display. The Alterians value honor and hierarchy. If we can demonstrate that their command structure cannot protect them from us, it will cascade through their entire military culture. What about collateral damage? Asked Corporal Sam Torres, though his tone suggested the question was more procedural than ethical. There are no civilians in this conflict, Mitchell replied. The alien coalition has declared war on our species. Every member of their civilizations is either directly supporting the war effort or benefiting from our planned extermination. We are authorized to treat this as total war. Across human space, similar teams were receiving their assignments. Ghost Team 3 would infiltrate the Drake and Homeworld Shadow Unit 5, would target Helios Union research facilities. Each team consisted of individuals who had been selected for their ability to operate beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare. The equipment they prepared looked nothing like standard military issue. Instead of weapons designed to destroy targets quickly and efficiently, their gear was built for maximum psychological impact sonic devices that caused permanent hearing damage, neurological toxins that induced paralysis while leaving victims conscious, nanomachines that could be introduced into enemy food and water supplies. Remember, Mitchell emphasized, our primary objective isn't just to disrupt their operations. We need to send a message that will spread throughout their command structure. Fear is a force multiplier. The teams began final preparations while receiving intelligence updates from human agents who had been embedded in alien territory for years. Some of these operatives had lived among the enemy so long they had started families and built entire lives while waiting for activation orders. The aliens had made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. They had studied human military conflicts and concluded they understood the scope of human violence. But they had only observed humans fighting other humans, with the restraints of shared biology and cultural understanding. They had never seen what humans were capable of. When those restraints were removed entirely, they were about to learn that the galaxy's fears about humanity had been woefully inadequate. The forces they had worried about were merely the ones humanity allowed other species to see. As the special operations teams departed for their targets, General Hayes remained in her command center. She knew that once these forces were deployed, there would be no going back. Humanity would either survive this war or take their enemies down with them. The choice had been made for them when the aliens decided to target civilians. Now they would learn what humans did to species that threatened their children. The underground facility beneath Mars had been sealed for 3 years, its existence known only to a handful of people in human government. Captain Ryan Mitchell walked through corridors that had been built to house humanity's most dangerous weapons. Not the mechanical kind, but the human kind. His team gathered in the briefing room like predators answering a call to hunt. Target analysis complete, announced Dr. Emily Foster as she activated the holographic display. Proxima Station serves as the primary coordination hub for the Alterian invasion fleet. 2,000 personnel, including their top military strategists, Sergeant Anna Lopez, examined the station schematics with professional interest. Security looks standard: energy barriers, automated defenses, the usual nothing we can't handle. Mitchell nodded. Standard assault doctrine would require a full battle group and result in the station's destruction. We're going to do something more educational. The difference between Ghost Team 7 and regular military forces wasn't just training or equipment. These individuals had undergone psychological conditioning that removed the normal human reluctance to inflict suffering. They had volunteered to become something that other humans would find disturbing. Staff Sergeant Mike Johnson pulled up biological data on their targets. Alterian neural pathways are more complex than human ones, he reported. They experience pain more intensely and retain traumatic memories with perfect clarity. Their enhanced nervous systems make them more susceptible to psychological manipulation. Useful, commented Corporal Sam Torres as he prepared specialized equipment. How long do we have before they expect regular communication from the station? 72 hours, Mitchell replied. More than enough time to complete our primary objectives and establish ongoing operations. Meanwhile, similar teams across human space were finalizing their own missions. Ghost Team 3 had infiltrated a civilian transport heading to the Dracon homeworld. Their target wasn't military installations but the families of enemy political leaders. Not to harm them, but to demonstrate that human operatives could reach anyone, anywhere. Shadow. Unit 5 approached the Helios Union research colony from an unexpected direction. Instead of attacking their facilities, they planned to introduce sophisticated computer viruses that would corrupt research data gradually. The effects wouldn't be noticed for months, but when they manifested, the results would be catastrophic. The transport ship, Merchant's Dream, docked with Proxima Station exactly on schedule. The crew presented legitimate cargo manifests and identification codes. What the Alterian security forces didn't know was that the ship's hull contained hidden compartments, and the crew had been replaced weeks earlier. Mitchell and his team moved through the station's cargo areas like ghosts. Their equipment included devices that could mimic Alterian biological signatures, rendering them invisible to most security sensors within 2 hours. They had mapped the entire facility and identified key personnel. Phase 1 complete. Mitchell reported over encrypted communications, beginning psychological operations. The first Alterian officer to disappear was Lieutenant Veth, a communications specialist working the night shift. He simply vanished from his post, leaving no trace except a message written on his workstation screen. "We know where you sleep." When the next shift arrived, they found Veth in the station's medical bay. He was alive but catatonic, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. The medical staff could find no physical injuries, but neurological scans showed severe psychological trauma. "What happened to him?" demanded Station Commander Nexel. "Unknown, sir," replied Chief Medical Officer Kale. "He keeps repeating the same phrase over and over. They're in the walls. They're watching. They know everything." Similar incidents began occurring throughout the station. Personnel would report strange sounds in the ventilation systems. Equipment would malfunction in subtle ways. Personal belongings would be moved or rearranged. Most disturbing of all, private communications would be intercepted, and personal information about families back home would appear on computer screens. Commander Nexel called for security sweeps, but the teams found nothing. The humans had learned techniques for moving through enemy facilities that were beyond Alterian understanding. They used the station's own systems against its occupants, turning familiar spaces into sources of terror. "Sir," reported Security Chief Wers, "we've completed our third sweep of the entire station. No unauthorized personnel detected, no evidence of infiltration, but morale is collapsing. Personnel are requesting transfer to combat zones because they feel safer facing human soldiers than staying here." The psychological campaign intensified over the following days. Dr. Foster had introduced neurochemical agents into the station's air recycling system. The compounds were undetectable, but caused vivid, recurring nightmares. Station personnel began experiencing shared hallucinations and collective paranoia. Johnson worked on the communications array, not to destroy it, but to modify it. Every message sent from the station now included hidden data packets containing false intelligence about human fleet movements. The enemy invasion force was being fed carefully crafted misinformation. "Status report," Mitchell requested. 40% of station personnel are requesting medical leave for psychological evaluation, Lopez reported. "The command staff is showing signs of severe stress. 3 officers have attempted suicide rather than continue serving here." "Computer systems are completely compromised," Torres added. "We have access to their entire communication network and supply chain databases. We've been feeding false information to their fleet positions for 36 hours. The breakthrough came when Commander Nexel himself was found in his quarters, sitting motionless at his desk. He had written a detailed confession describing his worst fears and military secrets. When questioned, he claimed he had no memory of writing it. "He's broken," Foster observed. "Complete psychological collapse. We can use him to transmit any message we want to Alterian Command." Mitchell reviewed the intelligence they had gathered: fleet positions, supply routes, communication codes, and most importantly, detailed information about Alterian homeworld defenses. "Prepare the commander for recording," he ordered. Let's send his people a message they'll never forget. The transmission that went out from Proxima Station would be remembered as one of the most terrifying communications in galactic history. Commander Nexel, speaking in a monotone voice while staring directly into the camera, described in graphic detail what had happened to his personnel. He begged Alterian Command to withdraw from human space before similar fates befell their families. They are not soldiers, he said. They are something else. Something that should not exist. We cannot fight them because they do not fight, they simply make us afraid to live. The message was broadcast on all Alterian military frequencies. Similar recordings began arriving from other locations where human special operations teams had been deployed. Each one told the same story. Human forces that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare. General Hayes received status reports from all active teams. Phase 1 complete across all theaters. She announced to her staff, enemy communication traffic has increased by 300% as paranoia spreads through their command structures. But this was only the beginning. The aliens still believed they could win through overwhelming force. They hadn't learned the real lesson yet. Phase 2 would teach them what humans did to civilizations that threatened their extinction. 3 weeks after the first human special operations teams had been deployed, the effects were spreading through the alien coalition like a virus. Admiral Korath stood in his command center aboard the flagship Righteous Victory, reading reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. Sir, reported his communications officer, we're receiving another priority medical request from Sector Command. That's the 7th one this week, personnel are requesting psychological evaluation and transfer to non-combat assignments. Korath frowned as he reviewed the latest intelligence summaries. According to official records, no major battles had been fought since New Babylon. Human resistance should have been minimal after such a devastating defeat. Yet morale throughout the Alterian fleet was collapsing. What's the status of our communication networks? He asked. Functioning normally, sir, the officer replied. All stations report regular contact, no technical difficulties. What they didn't realize was that 17 key communication hubs had been compromised by human operatives. The stations were still staffed and still broadcasting, but they were now under human control. False intelligence was being fed throughout the alien command structure. Korath's personal aide approached with a sealed message container. Sir, this was found in your private quarters. Security has scanned it thoroughly but cannot determine how it was placed there. Inside was a simple note written in perfect Alterian script. We know your ship's location. We know your family's address. We know your daughter attends the Academy of Sciences. Surrender now, or learn what humans do to the families of those who threaten ours. The Admiral's blood went cold. His quarters were protected by multiple security systems. No unauthorized personnel could enter without triggering alarms. Yet somehow, humans had not only gained access but had gathered detailed personal information about his family. Increased security around the command deck, he ordered, and get me a complete security review of this ship. Unknown to Korath, Ghost Team 12 had been aboard his vessel for over a week. They had infiltrated during a routine supply transfer, using forged identification and sophisticated disguises. Now they moved through the ship like phantoms, gathering intelligence and spreading fear. Captain Rachel Stone observed Alterian crew members through hidden cameras she had placed throughout the ship. They're showing classic signs of psychological breakdown, she reported to her team. Increased stress responses, paranoid behavior, reduced effectiveness. Sergeant Paul Martinez had been working on the ship's life support systems, introducing compounds that wouldn't harm the crew but would cause subtle neurological effects. Memory disruption protocol is active. He reported crew members are experiencing short-term memory loss and confusion. They know something is wrong but can't identify what. Meanwhile, on the Dracon homeworld, Ghost Team 3 was demonstrating humanity's reach in an even more personal way. They had infiltrated the capital city, not to attack military targets, but to prove that nowhere was safe from human operatives. Lieutenant David Walsh stood in the bedroom of General Voss's teenage son, carefully placing a small device on the nightstand. When activated, it would project holographic images of the boy's daily routine, proving that human agents had been watching and could have acted at any time. Package delivered, Walsh reported, moving to secondary target. The secondary target was the home of Defense Minister Court. The team left behind detailed surveillance reports of his family's activities, complete with photographs and personal information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. Similar operations were taking place across Draken space. Every political leader, every military commander, every person of importance was receiving the same message. Humans could reach them anywhere, anytime. The Helios Union faced a different kind of terror shadow unit. 5 had taken a more subtle approach, infiltrating their advanced research facilities. Instead of dramatic displays of infiltration, they were slowly corrupting the Union's technological advantage. Dr. Jennifer Lee worked in the computer core of the Union's primary weapons research facility. Her modifications to their systems were elegant and undetectable. Research data was being altered in ways that wouldn't become apparent for months. When the flawed information was used to build new weapons, the results would be catastrophic failures. Virus propagation at 60%, she reported. Their entire research network will be compromised within 2 weeks. Every weapon system they develop from this point forward will have hidden flaws. The psychological impact of these operations was spreading faster than the aliens could control. Reports of human infiltration were creating panic among civilian populations. Families of military personnel were demanding protection. Politicians were questioning whether the war was worth the risk to their own safety. Commander Yala of the Helios Union reviewed casualty reports with growing disbelief. "Our combat losses are minimal," she reported to the emergency council session. "But our non-combat casualties are skyrocketing. Personnel are suffering psychological breakdowns, requesting transfers, or simply disappearing." "How many humans are involved in these operations?" demanded Council Leader Zarin. "Our best estimates suggest no more than 50,000 individuals," General Voss replied. "But they seem to have support networks throughout the galaxy that we never detected." Ambassador Kreth laughed bitterly. 50,000 humans are paralyzing 3 galactic civilizations with a combined population of over 40 billion. Do you understand what that means? The implications were staggering. If such a small number of specially trained humans could accomplish this level of disruption, what could humanity's full military might achieve if they decided to abandon all restraints? "There's something else," Voss said quietly. "Our intelligence services have been analyzing human historical records. We focused on their recent conflicts, but we missed something crucial." He activated a display showing human warfare throughout their history. "These tactics we're experiencing aren't new. Humans have been developing these methods for thousands of years. What we're seeing is the culmination of millennia of evolution in asymmetric warfare." The council chamber fell silent as the full scope of their mistake became clear. They had declared war on a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to destroy. "Enemies more powerful than themselves, I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire," Kreth announced. "We need to open negotiations before they escalate to whatever Phase 3 involves." But even as he spoke, new reports were arriving. Human teams had begun operations that defied belief. On Alteria Prime, civilians were experiencing temporary but visible mutations caused by airborne agents. The effects were harmless but terrifying, designed to demonstrate that humanity could alter alien biology at will on the Draken homeworld. Individuals with specific genetic markers were becoming ill with a mysterious disease that left them weak but alive. Medical examinations revealed the illness was artificially created and targeted. The message was clear. Humans could kill anyone they chose, whenever they chose. The Helios Union discovered that their food synthesis systems had been compromised. Nothing dangerous was added, but the taste and appearance of food became disturbing. Citizens couldn't eat without being reminded that humans controlled what they consumed. "This is not warfare," General Voss said quietly. "This is systematic psychological terrorism, designed to break our will to fight. And it's working," Kreth admitted. "Civilian productivity has dropped 40%, military recruitment has nearly stopped. Our own people are more afraid of human retaliation than they are of losing the war." As the alien leaders debated surrender terms, General Hayes received a priority message from her intelligence networks. The enemy was ready to negotiate, but the special operations teams had identified an opportunity for something more permanent. "Madam General," reported Colonel Wright, "our assets have gathered enough intelligence to locate and neutralize the alien coalition's entire command structure. We could end this war decisively." Hayes considered the option. Humanity now had the capability to assassinate every major leader in the enemy coalition. They could cripple 3 civilizations permanently, but doing so would send a message to the entire galaxy that would change human-alien relations forever. Negative. She decided, "We've made our point, let them surrender with dignity. The galaxy needs to know that humans can show mercy as well as strength." The war was ending, but the lessons would be remembered for generations. Humanity had demonstrated that they were not just another species to be conquered. They were apex predators who had voluntarily limited their own capabilities. The galaxy would think very carefully before threatening human civilians again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chambers that felt more like a bunker than a seat of power. Ambassador Kreth of the Alterian Empire stood before his fellow delegates, but the confident leader who had declared war on humanity 3 months earlier was gone. In his place stood a broken alien whose hands shook as he read from intelligence reports. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our worst projections," he announced to the assembled representatives. "They are not targeting our military installations. They are targeting our ability to function as civilizations." General Voss of the Dracon Confederacy activated a holographic display showing casualty figures. "Our combat losses remain minimal," he reported, "but our societal losses are catastrophic. Civilian productivity has collapsed. Military recruitment has stopped. 3 of our core worlds have requested withdrawal from the war." Commander Yala from the Helios Union looked exhausted as she presented her own data. "Our technological superiority means nothing when the enemy can infiltrate our research facilities and corrupt our data. Every new weapon system we develop is compromised before it's deployed, Council." Leader Zaran's tentacled form writhed with agitation. "How many humans are responsible for this devastation? Intelligence estimates suggest fewer than 60,000 individuals." Kreth replied, "They have paralyzed 3 galactic civilizations with a combined population of 40 billion using tactics we never imagined possible." What the council members didn't fully understand was that humanity's special operations forces had moved far beyond conventional warfare. Phase 3 operations had introduced capabilities that challenged the basic assumptions of what civilized species could accomplish on Alteria Prime. Citizens woke each morning unsure if their water would taste normal, or if their reflection in mirrors would show subtle changes. The modifications were harmless, but psychologically devastating. Parents watched their children develop temporary but visible mutations, all while human broadcasts explained this was merely a demonstration. "My own grandson was affected," Kreth said quietly. "He developed blue markings across his face that lasted for 2 weeks. Our medical experts confirmed the changes were temporary and harmless. But the message was clear. They could have made the changes permanent. They could have made them lethal." The Draken homeworld faced targeted biological warfare on a scale they had never imagined humans had somehow gained access to Dracon genetic databases and begun introducing agents that affected only individuals with specific genetic markers. Not to kill them, but to make them sick enough to require hospitalization. "They're proving they can target anyone they choose," General Voss reported. "Military leaders, politicians, scientists. Anyone with the genetic profile they select becomes ill. The disease is treatable, but the implications are terrifying." The Helios Union discovered that their vaunted technological civilization was completely vulnerable to enemies willing to use tactics they had never considered human operatives, had infiltrated manufacturing facilities and introduced flaws into consumer products. Nothing dangerous, but everything stopped working properly. "Our people can't trust their own technology," Commander Yala said. "Personal computers display disturbing images, transportation systems experience random failures, even food synthesis units have been compromised. Citizens feel like they're living in a reality controlled by their enemies." Ambassador Kreth pulled up communication logs from his own military. This message was left in my personal quarters aboard our most secure vessel. He said, it contained detailed information about my family that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. The message played for the council. Admiral Korath, your daughter Maya, attends the Science Academy. She walks home, using the route that passes through Memorial Park. Your wife shops at the Central Market every Tuesday. Your elderly father lives in Assisted Living Complex 7. We know where they are. We know their schedules. We know how to reach them. End this war now. The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate understood the implications. If humans could gather such detailed intelligence about enemy families, they could target anyone. The war had moved beyond military conflict into something resembling systematic stalking of entire civilizations. There's something else, General Voss said reluctantly. Our anthropologists have completed their analysis of human historical warfare. What we're experiencing isn't new. These tactics have been developing for thousands of years. He activated displays showing human conflicts throughout their evolution. They call it asymmetric warfare. When facing superior enemies, humans don't fight fairly. They fight to win regardless of cost. Every technique we've encountered has precedent in their previous conflicts. Commander Yala leaned forward. Are you saying they've been holding back? I'm saying we've seen human capabilities when they're fighting for colonies. Voss replied, we haven't seen what they're capable of when they're fighting for survival based on their history. There are escalation levels we haven't encountered yet. The council chamber erupted in worried discussions. If the current operations were considered restrained by human standards, what would unrestricted human warfare look like? I'm calling for immediate surrender negotiations, Kreth announced. We cannot win this conflict. More importantly, we cannot survive the escalation if we continue. Agreed, said General Voss. Our military analysis indicates that human special forces are operating under significant restrictions. If those restrictions are removed, the consequences could be civilization ending. Commander Yala nodded. Our technological advantages are meaningless against an enemy that operates beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare. They've turned our own infrastructure against. The vote for surrender was unanimous. But as the delegates prepared their negotiation terms, a small device on the council table activated. It had been sitting in plain sight throughout the entire session, disguised as a decorative crystal. We've been listening, appeared on the device's display. We know your surrender terms before you send them. We know your fallback positions. We know your contingency plans. There are no secrets from humanity. Council leaders Iran stared at the device with a mixture of fear and admiration. How long have they been monitoring our discussions? Since the beginning, came the reply. We heard your declaration of war. We heard your plans for genocide. We prepared accordingly. The implications were staggering. Human intelligence operations had been so thorough that they had monitored the enemy's decision-making process from the very start. The entire war had been fought with humanity holding complete information superiority. What are your terms? Kreth asked the device. Withdrawal from all human territories. Reparations for damage to New Babylon. Formal recognition of human sovereignty. Most importantly, acknowledgement that civilian populations are off-limits in any future conflicts. The terms were surprisingly reasonable. Humanity could have demanded much more given their demonstrated capabilities. The fact that they were offering terms at all suggested a level of restraint that other species might not have shown. Why? General Voss asked. You could destroy us. Why show mercy? Because the galaxy needs to understand something. The device replied, humans are capable of terrible things when threatened, but we choose not to use those capabilities unless forced. This war ends with your surrender, not your extinction. That choice demonstrates what humans value. As the Council voted to accept human terms, delegates realized they were witnessing a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had proven they were not just another species to be conquered or controlled. They were apex predators who had voluntarily limited their own capabilities in the interest of coexistence. The war was over, but its lessons would reshape galactic politics for generations. Other species would remember that the forces they had feared were merely the ones humanity allowed them to see. Behind those conventional forces stood specialists who could end civilizations without firing a shot. Humanity's reputation as a dangerous species was confirmed, but so was their capacity for mercy. The galaxy would think very carefully before threatening human civilians again. And in the shadows, the special forces teams that had won this war returned to their hidden facilities, waiting for the next time their skills might be needed. The age of human expansion had begun, but not through conquest. The galaxy itself had acknowledged that some species were too dangerous to fight. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior understanding of what it meant to survive at any cost.